Hello, everyone, and welcome to UnZOOsual Careers, where we explore the variety of careers in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math here at the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute. My name is Shelley. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'll be your host for today. Before we meet our program's guests, you are going to see two polls pop up on your screen. First, have you ever heard of a park manager? Yes or no? And two, which of the following subjects do you think is involved in park management? You can select all that apply: science, technology, engineering, arts, or math. While you take some time to answer the poll, I'm going to take some time to go over the format of today's program. This webinar is live captioned. You'll want to locate that CC button at the bottom of your screen in order for those to appear. You will also notice that this program is being interpreted in American Sign Language. This feature is best viewed from a desktop computer rather than a tablet or phone. If you are having trouble with either service, please chat us so we can assist you. Remember, this is a webinar, so we cannot see or hear you, but we encourage you to engage with us in a number of ways. As you already saw, we will be launching polls throughout today's program. Additionally, you will see that Q&A is also open. Please use the Q&A for questions at any time and try to keep your questions on topic. You can check under the My Questions column to see if your question was addressed. Educators, if you are streaming for your whole class, please be sure to keep your keyboard close and chime in on behalf of your students. Today's program will be about 45 minutes with an additional 15 minutes at the end for a live Q&A, where we will answer as many questions as time will allow. Lastly, you will see that the chat is also open for you to message us any comments. I want you to now find that chat and tell us what your name and where you are joining us from, and if you have a favorite animal. While you find that chat, I will quickly introduce our team working to help me behind the scenes. Today we have Erica, Kaden, Jess, Emily, and Anthony also answering your questions. Let's see. Tell us your name and where you're joining us from if you have a favorite animal. I know some folks are actually joining us here from the National Zoo, which is very exciting. All right, we have Ellie from Michigan. We have their favorite animal is a black jaguar or a dragon. Very nice. I don't know if you've seen, but we have Komodo dragons here at the National Zoo. We have an older one named Murphy, and our youngest Komodo dragon is named Onyx. That's really exciting. All right. So once again, everybody, welcome to, we have another classroom, a whole classroom tuning in from Virginia, a middle school from Dayton, Virginia. Welcome. And their favorites are pandas and gorillas, another great animal, which we have here at the National Zoo. Quite infamous, actually. All right, so once again, everybody, welcome to UnZOOsual Careers. I am so thrilled to welcome Ashlie Baker to the program. Welcome, Ashlie.
Hello, thanks for having me, Shelley.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Ashlie, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Great. What do you do here at the zoo?
I am the park manager at the National Zoo.
What does it mean to be a park manager?
Ooh, that's a little bit of a loaded question, but I'll try to answer that. So the park manager at the zoo, you have to be able to wear several different hats. We have a very large campus. A lot of different units fall under park manager, and you have to just be able to be flexible and respond to emergencies. It's a very dynamic work environment. So really flexibility and being able to prioritize your time are very important.
Great. So you have a lot of units, I know, that fall under your umbrella, but can you briefly tell us, why is your title park manager and not necessarily zoo manager?
Right. So I would, to simplify it, I think that being a park manager goes far beyond just the zoo responsibilities when you think about the animals. Luckily for me, I have a great team that works underneath the park management umbrella. We have a safety team. We have a horticulture team that really takes care of all of the grounds and the landscape management throughout the park. We have our guest services team that really is the front-facing staff that interacts with all the public as they come in. We also have our parking operation and our retail operation that they're also front-facing of the zoo. And then we also have just our facilities that fall under park management that we liaison with, and as well as the zoo police.
Wow, so there's all these other aspects of running a zoo beyond just the live animal component, that you're making sure that this place that we call the National Zoo is a fun, enjoyable, accessible place for all of our guests outside of just enjoying the animals. That's really exciting. A lot of people maybe have never been to the National Zoo or have never seen it, or don't really understand just how big this park is. So I'm going to launch another poll here for all of our students and viewers watching. I want you to tell me, how big do you think the National Zoo is? 13 acres, 73 acres, 163 acres, or 203 acres. And to give you a little bit of perspective, I actually just had to look this up. One football field is about equal to 1 acre. So we are looking here at this awesome Google Earth image of the National Zoo from space to help give you a little bit of perspective. So I'll give you a few more seconds on this poll. And another thing to think about, go ahead and drop in the chat if you know the name of the national park that the National Zoo sits in. Feel free to put that in the chat as well. Let's see if anybody knows. And I'm going to close this poll in 3, 2, and 1. Let's see. Let's share our results here. All right, Ashlie. So most of our friends watching said 163 acres, followed by 203 acres. How big is the National Zoo?
So 163 acres is correct. It seems like a lot of viewers might have some inside knowledge. So that was a very awesome guess.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and just to put that in perspective, as Shelley mentioned, that 1 acre is about the size of a football field. That's about 124 football fields. So that is just a massive space that we have to maintain. Although not all of it is occupied, about 73 acres of it is occupied that with exhibits and our grounds that we actually maintain.
That's such a large area. And again, just to repeat that, that's 163 acres of land and park, but you said about 73 acres is actually used by animals and people. And so we are also getting some answers here in the chat. Very close to the park that the National Zoo sits in here is called Rock Creek Park. So we had some close ones. Tracy did Smithsonian's National Zoological Park. Exactly, that is our formal title. So you mentioned that this is such a large area, so that's why you have all of these other small teams under your umbrella: guest services, safety, horticulture, maintaining the grounds. What would you say is the most important skill that you have or learned in your position in juggling all these different aspects in the park?
Sure. So I would say definitely being flexible and being proactive and just really focusing on prioritizing your time, especially as emergencies arise. Because I mean, just like a student or just like any of us as of my colleagues, we usually go into the day with a planned schedule and we know what to expect. You know, we're planning for meetings, we're planning for projects, so we have maybe interviews, things of that nature. But you really have to be able to switch gears if an emergency arises. And that can come from an animal emergency, it could be a visitor emergency, it could be a weather emergency, you know, several different things could happen on any given day at the zoo that you have to really be able to be flexible and react to.
That's such an important thing to think about, that with a zoo, a lot of people will clump zoos in with museums, but the difference is we have a living collection that we have to kind of keep up with. Like you said, those
Absolutely.
emergencies that might come up will affect animal welfare or their safety. So I want
Exactly.
our viewers to put on their park management hat, and we're going to launch another poll here. I want you to pretend like you are the zoo's park manager. If you were Ashlie and you received the following calls on one day, I want you to think about which one you would prioritize first. So a drain backs up on the main walkway, an animal needs to be transported to the hospital, the gift shop has a delivery, and a food truck doesn't have power. So you can use the poll to let me know which one would you take care of first. You can also put your explanations in the chat, or maybe rank them in the chat as well. And I'll give you a few seconds on that poll. With so many things coming up at once, again, taking that time to be flexible and prioritizing what needs to happen. Let's see. Hi, Julia, I saw you joining us. All right, I'll give you a few more seconds on that poll, and I'll close it in 3, 2, 1, and then we'll hear how Ashlie would deal with this. All right, Ashlie, so the majority of people said an animal needs to be transported to the hospital is what you would prioritize. Is that right?
Yes, so correct answer again, absolutely. So we are a zoo and we do have a large collection of animals that we have to take care of, and they are, a prime importance of our responsibilities day in and day out. So although I wouldn't necessarily be the person that would be transporting the animal or working on the animal or taking them to the hospital to see what was going on, I would definitely be involved with securing the space so that they can either get the animal out of the exhibit. We would block off for different road closures. We would make sure the visitors and all the staff are staying safe. So zoo police have to be involved as well. So there's a lot of different departments that fall under just taking care of an animal if it needs to be transported.
Absolutely.
And then after that, if all those things are going on at the same time that are in the chat, then, you work with your facilities team to address the backup with the drains on the walkway. So, you can definitely do things simultaneously. We have our two-way radio system that is very helpful throughout the park, where we can talk to each other on the radios. We can reach other departments very quickly. And then, the last of the food truck doesn't have power and the retail shop needs the delivery. Of course, we would try to address the food service aspect because that's a visitor service amenity. So we would try to get them up and running and working with our on-site electricians, and then just working out, finding where the delivery is supposed to go. As I mentioned, we have a very large campus, so sometimes deliveries get lost as they come in. So we really have a lot of different departments that can help people find their way.
That's great. We had some really good guesses in the chat as well. Noelle said, number one, you would make sure that that animal has a safe route to the hospital, which is fantastic. They said 2 would be the food truck, 3 would be the drain, and everything else. So yeah, it's thinking forward, and you have to think ahead. That drain could potentially turn into a guest safety issue, right?
Yes, very much so.
And making sure that that food truck has electricity to provide safe food to guests. Absolutely, so much flexibility like you talked about. And Ellie said, you are part of the zoo and you're not just responsible for the food truck. Exactly, Ellie. So many hats like we talked about, that you really do have to have a hand in all of the happenings around the zoo to make sure everything is happening smoothly and efficiently. That's great.
And I think that's a very important part too, just being able to work well with others, and because all of this requires a lot of coordination with different teams.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, you might be calling the electrician to deal with the food truck. You might be calling the plumbing shop to deal with the drain. You might be calling the vet hospital and zoo police to deal with the animal transport. Exactly. And you might be calling our supply team to deal with the delivery. So much collaboration throughout the park. It's great. And here's another great example that we see on the screen of another aspect that you touched on, is your role in horticulture. Can you talk to us about what's happening in these pictures?
Sure. So we definitely have a horticulture team, and we also have an arborist that falls under that horticulture team. So we have horticulturists, arborists, gardeners, equipment operators. So although we have to maintain the safety within the park, whereas though there may be a tree that is not doing so well and needs to be taken down to make sure, we keep our visitors and staff safe, we work with outside contractors to help us get that job done. But as in the first picture that's shown where it shows the street sign, we also have to worry about our perimeter fencing, because although we're nestled into Rock Creek Park, we also back up to a lot of different housing areas and also to the park service within Rock Creek Park. So we have to maintain our fence line. And sometimes, there's some trees that need to be addressed along those areas as well. So that falls under our responsibility in the park management umbrella as well.
That's great. Yeah. So, some of those emergencies we talked about, animal emergencies that require making space for the animal to get up to the hospital, but there's other emergencies that can arise in the park, like a tree needs to come down. That's a safety issue. So making sure that we're caring for those trees annually or as needed.
And it may be a situation where there wasn't anything wrong with a tree. We could have had a strong storm come through the night before, and trees come down, and we have to react, and we have to make sure this space is safe and accessible for all our guests.
Absolutely. That's great. So we launched a poll right when we started the program to see what aspects of STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, a park manager would use. And from our results, we really saw that people really guessed all of the elements: science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Which of the following do you use? Do you use all of them, and how do you use them?
I would say on a consistent basis, definitely technology and math. We have virtual meetings that either I have to host or I have to join. We have to do presentations. We create spreadsheets in the park management department. And a lot of the math that's involved is with our budgeting and finance. So each department within the zoo will get a budget that they have to operate from for the entire year. And a lot of that has to go into budget and planning, where that math comes into play.
Wow. So you mentioned the importance of flexibility in just your day-to-day operations, but I imagine there's a lot of flexibility that you have to have with creating these budgets as emergencies that require money arise, right?
Absolutely. So we are a federal institution, so the admission to our zoo is free, which a lot of people I don't think realize. So a lot of our federal funding comes from appropriated funds that have to be distributed throughout all the park. So we can have our budget that we plan for, but then we also, like I said, these trees that come down in a storm, or we have major snowstorms one year that requires a lot of snow removal, for example, that may involve additional equipment and additional supplies to make sure that we can do the snow removal. Things like that, or there's an animal emergency. Sometimes there could be an animal chips a tooth or something like that, and it's an unexpected dentist emergency that the animal care unit has to, apply for. So it's all different moving parts. We do have a base budget, but there's so many examples where we could have things happen that were unplanned. So it has to be flexible. Sometimes you won't get everything that you plan for because you have to use those funds to react to the emergency.
Yeah. And again, the same theme of both flexibility, but also foresight, trying to plan ahead, but knowing that there will be some unexpected payments that need to happen. That's great. And yeah, just again, for those of you who are unaware, that the National Zoo sits again in the middle of that Rock Creek Park in the middle of Washington, D.C. So if you're familiar with the weather in this area, we do get a lot of winter storms or summer storms unexpectedly. So those trees falling, snow clearing, all of that is just day to day for Ashlie and her job. That's great. And I do want to say with the budgeting, I've worked for the zoo for almost 7 years now, and understanding that federal payment, being a free institution like all the other Smithsonian museums is so wonderful, but does bring in a lot of complications when it comes to paying for things. But that's great. So
yeah, can I comment on that?
Absolutely, please.
So in addition to the federal funds that you were just mentioning, we also have to rely on our revenue generating activities at the zoo. So we do get revenue in through our parking and our retail and carousel operations like that, and the rentals that we sell. So that helps with different departments and being able to have funds to help with these emergencies, because a lot of our federal funding just helps cover salaries. So it's very important to make sure we have a great guest experience, that our visitors are coming back to visit us, because they are a key role in keeping the zoo profitable and being able to operate.
Absolutely. I want everyone at home to think about that for a second. Think about if you've been to a zoo before, and feel free to put it in the chat if you've been to a zoo, which zoo, and maybe if you have a memory from that zoo, was it a really positive memory? And these are those positive experiences that we want our guests to have when they come to the zoo, so that they can then tell their family and friends about all of the wonderful conservation stories that are happening here at the zoo. And if you're having a good time, then you're more likely to come back and visit us again. So that's everything that Ashley's talking about, is just to make our guests have an enjoyable time here, which is great. So some of the other careers that this series has explored have been more animal research related, things like that. So while you in your role are not working directly with the animals, your job is still helping to advance the zoo's mission of saving species. How does your job help support animal conservation?
So I really think our guest services team and our volunteer interpreters play a huge role in that, because they really are the front-facing staff at the zoo, and they are the ones that are explaining our stories to our guests of why we have the animals that we have and the endangered species that we take care of. So they're a very important aspect as far as educating our public and making it an enjoyable and accessible space for everyone. I also know that when we host events like Earth Optimism Day, that really gives people examples of how that they can continue to support our animal conservation, whether it's drinking bird-friendly coffee. I know kids should not be drinking coffee, so we're talking to your parents. And then also just building mason bee houses to, promote pollinators, making sure that people are following correct recycle and using reusable items at home. The reusable water station that just popped up, that's a huge initiative at the zoo, is to really try to reduce plastics. So that is something that we're focusing on in the upcoming years.
That's really great. And I do want to comment, Ellie said that they've been to Toledo Zoo, and some of their memories were the lights before Christmas. They had some close cheetah encounters with the brothers, which is so great. And those are memories that they're going to have forever. So it's creating those same memories here at the National Zoo. So you just mentioned reducing plastic use in the zoo. And I really want to touch on that, because it's something that all of us, even those watching from school or at home, can also do. So audience, put in the chat ways that you have already started to reduce your plastic, or ways that you want to start reducing your plastic. And Ashlie, walk us through some of these other ways that the zoo is working to reduce our plastic use as an institution.
Sure. So that little greening with you is one of our logos for our sustainability committee. That is a volunteer committee that we have at the zoo, and I am actually the co-chair of that committee. So this huge plastic reduction initiative was really spearheaded from that committee. And we try to make sure we're focusing on that by installing these refillable water stations, so that people are encouraged to bring their own reusable bottle. And we have them a lot in staff areas right now, but we're continuing to work to put them throughout the park. But we do have some available for the public. Also, we do not do lids or straws. So that is a danger to our collection. So we make sure that everyone understands why we don't offer those with our drinks. We do have a compostable paper straw that could be offered upon request, but we try to reduce that as well. And then we also have our recycling where cans throughout the park. So we can just have our trash, and then we make sure that the bottles and cans go to the correct recycling units. And our biggest change from last year was all of our carbonated beverages that we had out in the zoo. We've transitioned them to aluminum cans. So our next step in that initiative is to follow up with like water and Gatorade to get them on the same program.
That's great, and such a simple switch to just cans from bottles. And we are getting so many good responses in the chat here. Let's see, some folks said using reusable shopping bags, reusing plastic containers, recycling, washable water bottles, absolutely. You know, and these are all great examples that Ashlie mentioned as well that we can all do to all be more conservation minded. So the next time that you go to a zoo, potentially bring whether it's our zoo or your local zoo, bring a reusable water bottle to refill, and you can spread the word about these simple actions to reduce our plastic use. And like I said, all of these little small actions do add up to just living more conservation minded. What are some other things that are happening in the park to be more sustainable?
Yeah, so we are definitely conservation minded when we look to what kind of vendors that we want to have in the park, or the type of events that we host when we're looking for vendors to come in to host certain events. For instance, we have a food trucks program out in the zoo, but we make sure that they are ran through electric and that they're not just idling all day to be able to operate. So we definitely focus in on that aspect. And then as far as horticulture goes, just water conservation. We most recently, I'd say within the last 5 years, had a irrigation system that was put in so that it can really monitor the amount of water that is used throughout the park to maintain all of our lovely plantings that we have.
Yeah, that's so great. And such a great point that one, we all have a role to play in conservation. And even with not being, you know, working directly with the animals, your career is still advancing the conservation in the park. That's wonderful.
Another aspect too, also that I forgot to mention through horticulture was just about our perching. So you showed those great photos of where we're doing a lot of tree work. And of course, we don't want to take down trees that we don't have to. And we do replant throughout the year at certain times as well. But any tree that comes down that is approved through our commissary can be browsing for our collection, or we can just use it as perching in some exhibits. So we really try to repurpose any materials that we can.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, so we don't want to cut down trees. As we know, trees are home to so many different animals. But if we have to cut down a tree in the park for maybe a safety issue, how can we repurpose that tree? So as Ashlie just mentioned, if it's an approved tree to go in an animal exhibit, for example, it's not toxic, we could take this big cutting of a branch or a tree and turn that into a climbing structure for a panda or a clouded leopard. And it's repurposing the use of the tree. It had to come down for safety issues, but now it's going in as animal enrichment, which is fantastic. I love all of this sustainability talk and conservation actions that we're all taking here at the zoo. But I don't want to gloss over your impact on the animals directly. Again, while you're not caring for the animals day to day, you are directly impacting their welfare and safety. And so before we hear how, I'm going to launch another poll here. Erica's going to throw up a picture of something here on the screen, and I want you to tell me what animal is in this crate, do you think? There's a couple hints on the screen. We'll see if you'll be able to tell. Put it in the poll, or feel free to put it in the chat, maybe what your reasoning is, or if you see those hints in the picture. Would love to hear. Give you a few seconds on that poll. All right. Oh, we got some other ones here. Oh, Julia had a great memory from Woodland Park Zoo. Was having a birthday party there. That's great. All right, no one's guessing elephants, which is good. We know elephants are probably much bigger than this crate. So that's a good observation. All right, I'll give you another 3, 2, 1 on that poll. All right, let's see. 68% said giant panda, followed by lion and Aldabra tortoise. Ashlie, what's happening in this photo?
So again, the majority, good guess, it was a panda. This is actually an example of them preparing to move Bao Bao back to China. So many different animals that we have to move are not easily done in a handheld crate. So there takes a lot of coordination between our facilities team, our equipment operators, as you see right now in this video. We have to block off the paths to make sure it's a safe route to get them to the large tractor trailer and then to the airport. So it is definitely a lot of coordination with different units. And, you know, as you saw on the tractor, the little panda ears, we try to make it festive and fun because it's exciting and everyone loves our pandas. So everyone wants to see a safe and happy departure.
Absolutely. So again, as we saw in this video, Bao Bao being prepared to move all the way to China, and Ashlie and her team has such a role in, again, ensuring that that animal can safely get to where it needs to go, from coordinating the heavy machinery to coordinating closing off the walkways, coordinating how to get the press in and guests out. Wonderful. And we're doing this with, you know, every day, but also special events too. So we saw with the pandas, but like we talked about, if an animal just needs to go up to the hospital, she's doing that as well. So everything from elephants to pandas and everything in between. And I think we have another video of another animal shipment. Here we go. Let's see if folks can guess what's in this animal crate. This one's a little bit bigger. What do folks think? You can put it in the chat if you know. Oh, that was a big hint. Oh. Yeah, so this was an elephant shipment. So again, yes, exactly, Ellie, an elephant. And Julia got it too. Yes, so very different equipment as we saw. This is a huge semi truck with all the wheels versus just a tractor having to lift the panda. So there's another role that you and your team play in animal safety and management, and that's keeping guests safe as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you keep guests safe, potentially should an animal escape?
Sure. So we never want that to happen, first off. But if it does, we practice code green drills throughout the park, and our safety manager and our zoo police and the curators of the department of where the animal, depending on the animal, which department it is, it's the same ordeal. We have to make sure that the staff and the visitors are the main priority of keeping this animal safe. There's different requirements if it's considered to be a dangerous animal versus a non-dangerous animal. So there's a lot of different things you have to take into account. And then we just have to make sure that we immediately, clear the area to give the staff their place to work, and that we keep the guests safe and out of harm's way.
Absolutely. So once again, in addition to everything else Ashlie is doing, still has to keep this animal safety and welfare in mind. And we talk about these, she mentioned code green drills. So we practice so that should an animal unfortunately get out, everyone under Ashlie, everyone in the park will be ready to assess the situation and make sure everybody is kept safe. That's fantastic. So Ashlie, let's talk a little bit about how you got here. What was your path to this position as a park manager at the National Zoo?
So when I went to college, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I know as a child, I was always said that I'd like to be a veterinarian, but as time went on and you realize some of the extended coursework that's involved with that, I kind of took a different approach. So I actually went into just business administration with a bachelor's degree of science in that. And although we don't typically think of the zoo as a business operation, there's really so many aspects that are similar with the operations and the financial part of it that are a major component in operating the zoo. So although I was in a different environment prior to the zoo, coming to the zoo, I still used a lot of the same management skills that I learned throughout my coursework and my previous job.
Absolutely. So what was the biggest difference that you found in going from a non-zoo business position to a zoo business position?
Oh, the biggest difference I would think is just this one had a lot more focus on the visitor aspect and making sure everything was accessible to all of our visitors. As far as like the scheduling, the staffing, the inventory controls and budgeting and things of that nature, that was all very similar. But this component at the zoo had a very bigger aspect of the visitor services experience. So I mean, in the whole entire setting, it's outdoors. You know, I came from a traditional, you know, business indoor office environment. So this was totally different, but it's a lot more exciting.
My next question was going to be, what made you choose the position at the zoo and what made you make that jump?
Yeah, so I've always loved being outdoors and I love animals. So this opportunity came to me that someone was looking for an assistant at the zoo. So I kind of started my way there and I applied for the position and I was just like, I can use all my management skills that I currently use and do it in an awesome zoo setting. So I applied and that's why I kind of transitioned to this field and it's been great.
And I know so many people have a similar almost path of, they've always loved animals. As you mentioned, you wanted to be a veterinarian. I at one point also wanted to be a veterinarian, decided that much schooling was not right for me, but here we both are, kind of found ourselves back in a zoo, but in a non-direct animal way. And as we talked about everything before, still playing a role in conservation, which is great.
And exactly, I don't think that you ever, well, at least for myself, I never thought that this particular position was a thing. So just knowing that facilities, we need electricians at the zoo, we need plumbers, we have HVAC staff, we have guest services, we have safety managers. So there's so many different opportunities that it doesn't necessarily have to be a science field that you're going into, that you can still work in an environment that you love and do different fields of study.
Absolutely. And I just want to reiterate that because that is exactly what we hope our students and all of our viewers watching right now take away in this series, that there are so many zoo careers and that conservation can happen in any career and in anywhere. So thank you for making that point. That's wonderful. Do you have any advice for people who might be interested, whether it's in a park management, just a business career, any advice for young folks watching?
Sure. So I think if you take anything that's like accounting or financial related as courses in college, that will really help with your budgeting and forecasting. Any type of recreation or horticulture field can kind of land you into this department of mine. Any type of trade schools that I just mentioned above, any of those courses can really help you get on a path to work at the zoo if that's something that you would be very interested in, but not necessarily going the animal route to work with the animals directly.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashlie. We are getting so many good questions into the Q&A. Before we jump over to the Q&A, I'm going to launch our last two polls here. I know that some students might need to go to the next class and such, so feel free to take these at any time. But how did you feel about today's program? And how did this program leave you feeling? You can use the chat as well. So let's see what all these amazing questions that we have in the chat are. Ellie would like to know, and I would also like to know, as we are a zoo, what is your favorite animal and why?
Okay, so I'm kind of a cat person. So I love the lions and the tigers. Any of the great cats, they're pretty awesome to see. And I actually had the opportunity when I was doing a duty officer one weekend to be kind of hands-on to help with a lion procedure. They had something wrong with one of the lion's tooth that they had to anesthetize them, and it just helped. I just helped kind of like maneuver the lion. So it was just cool to be that up close and personal, and just really to see how massive and beautiful those animals are.
Can you quickly define what does it mean to be a duty officer?
Sure. So every weekend at the zoo, we want to make sure that we have leadership available to kind of be the go-to person in case anything arises. So there's usually a duty curator, which is one of the curators to one of the animal units, and then a duty officer that works directly with them to be the point person for that weekend.
Great. And again, I think this goes back to everything we're talking about these emergencies that can come up at any time. The zoo is open 364 days a year, which means weekends. So emergencies don't stop on the weekends. So we need to make sure that we have managers like Ashlie there on site to help manage should something come up. That's great. Ellie also loves cats, who asked that question. So lots of cat fans always in these programs. Maybe you already answered this, but what was your most surprising day you've ever had at the zoo?
Surprising day. I would say, I don't know if this was a fun example, but we had an instance where there was an emergency that arose on American Trail just with a chemical in the pool area. So it was very exciting. We had to react very quickly, but that involved bringing outside response with fire trucks and outside police to help our zoo police. And it was just a lot of coordination to make sure that the area was free from visitors and that we maintain safe space. And just imagining those big fire trucks on the walkway, trying to get them to an area that is, kind of remote and closed off. So that was a very exciting day. And I'm glad everything worked out and there was no, huge issue with it, and it all worked out. So that was great.
What we like to see at the end of those big surprises or emergencies, that everything goes smoothly, which is why we do the drills, right?
Yes, exactly.
Great. So we mentioned that there's a lot of teams that you work under you or you work with. How big is the team that helps with park management? How many staff members, if you know off the top of your head?
For our department, that includes our integrated pest management team, because that is also, I forgot to mention that earlier, but that is also aspect of the zoo that most people probably don't think about, that we need to control the pests and not inside the animal exhibits and within the park. So we have pest management, safety, horticulture, and guest services. Our guest services team has about 30 staff members, and then the rest of those units, there's probably about 14 people in between IPM, horticulture, and safety.
So again, just to reiterate, IPM, that was the integrated pest management. So when we talk about pests, we're talking about animals that are maybe getting into exhibits or human spaces that we don't necessarily want there.
Correct.
So you might think of maybe mice getting in. Again, we are in a huge park, as we mentioned, right? 163 acres. We have mice that might be getting in, just your basic things that are in kitchens like cockroaches or insects that we don't necessarily want mingling with our exhibit animals. So we have a whole team dedicated to ensuring that we can safely remove any pests that we want to exclude from exhibits. That's great. CJ and Sweetums, which I believe is their hamster, asked, how many people visit the zoo?
Well, that depends on if you're talking about during peak season or off peak season, but we have probably close to like 2 billion visitors a year. That, of course, that number has changed a little bit due to COVID, but prior to COVID, that's about how many visitors that we have walk through our gates on any given year.
Absolutely. So that is, I'm sorry, can you repeat that number?
Oh, 2 million.
2 million people. And when we talk about making the zoo a happy, enjoyable place, that those 2 million people come to the zoo, maybe take home some conservation-minded actions that they learned here and want to come back. It's such an important part of why the zoo is here, to educate those 2 million people about saving species, what they can do, what you at home can do to help save species. That's incredible. Lily asked, do you know how many animals are at the zoo?
Oh, good question. I actually do not know the answer to that. I don't know if you know that answer or not, Shelley.
Let's see if I can quickly. I believe we have over 300 species. Yeah, we have 360 species and over 2,000 different individual animals, which is such a big number, because if folks have visited or have explored on our website before, we have a whole coral lab. Now, coral are these little aquatic organisms. So there's hundreds in one tank alone. And we have, in the I believe 40 or 50 different naked mole rats in small mammal house alone. So we have, yes, many, many species. That is 300, what did I say? 390 species, 360 species, and 2 million visitors had the chance to see all those species, which is fantastic. Oh, Ellie has asked, what are my favorite animals? My favorite animal is called a sloth bear. Which is one of the 8 species of bear. If you have read the Jungle Book, Baloo in the Jungle Book is a sloth bear, and we have 2 here at the National Zoo, living up on Asia Trail. So those are my favorite animals, but feel free to put in the chat. I know I saw some more. Julia likes dogs and cats and all animals. I know we have lots of fans here.
And I just wanted to add one thing, Shelley. Something else that our listeners can do as they get older and they are starting to think about what field to go into, volunteer. That was one thing I forgot to mention. If you love working in a park setting or a zoo setting, on your summers from break, if you're going into college or work in a veterinarian's office, anything of those nature will help you get your foot into the door if that is something you want to learn and gain that invaluable experience.
Absolutely. We did have a question about volunteering at the zoo. For most of the volunteer positions here at the zoo, you do have to be 18 and older. And you can look for those upcoming positions on the zoo's website. Right now, most of our volunteer programs are on hold, but we have potentially in the future, we'll have volunteer positions in many of the different units as well. So you could volunteer with horticulture, helping with the trees and the plantings and things like that. Or you could potentially be volunteering as an interpreter, which is helping to educate those 2 million guests who come through about all of those endangered animals that we had, which is great. Let's see other questions from the Q&A. I see, no, the sloth bear is not named Baloo. The sloth bears that we have here at the National Zoo are named Nico is one and Democ is the other. Great. How many rare species do we have at the zoo? That's a really good question. Do you know off the top of your head, Ashlie?
I don't know.
So this is a hard question to answer because a lot of species are very rare and hard to find. So it's hard for scientists, it's hard for researchers to get an accurate estimation of how many of the animals are left. But the importance of the zoo and why the work that I do and the work that Ashlie does and all of my coworkers behind the scenes and all of our veterinarians, it's so important because many of the animals that we have here at the National Zoo, like the giant panda, like the Asian elephant, they are very endangered. So again, another reason why it's so important for all of these unusual careers to work and collaborate together to continue to spread awareness about these endangered animals and all of the things that our 2 million visitors can do when they leave the zoo to help all of our endangered animals. So that's great. All right, let's see. It looks like most of our questions were answered, but if anyone has any last questions, to go ahead and put those in the Q&A. Oh, let's see. Do we have a bird area? We do. Our birdhouse is currently being renovated right now and is slated to open sometime in later 2022. Ashlie, what is your role in the renovating of the birdhouse?
Hands-on is not too much me specifically till we get closer to reopening, but our horticulture team has definitely been on that design team and all those project meetings. The curator of horticulture would talk about the different species of plants that they want to have in the exhibit, how it's going to be maintained and things of that nature. So they've definitely been hands-on, and I am assuming that as soon as we get closer to reopening, then my role will kind of come in.
Yeah, will it be on you to train some of the guest services on how to maneuver the building, the different areas in the building, to staff that building?
Absolutely. So our guest services also cover controlled access and entry into our houses. So they monitor, especially during peak season, and a new exhibit that's going to create a lot of excitement. So we would definitely have to train that staff to make sure that they're aware of the species that are within the birdhouse and be able to have talking points for the visitors that are coming over there and really help with the wayfinding.
That's great. That's so wonderful. Well, we are just about out of questions. This has been such a wonderful opportunity to talk to you, Ashlie, and learn all about this unusual career. Thank you so much for joining the program. I know I learned a lot. Thank you for
having me.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for our viewers?
I would say just continue to keep learning in any area that you can, especially as you guys are young and going through high school. If there's electives that you can take to really just explore different areas of learning, I think that really gives you a baseline and some guidance on what you want to do as you move to your college career. And volunteer. We love volunteers.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashlie. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Our next installment of UnZOOsual Careers will be on Friday, January 7th at 1 p.m., where we will be in discussion with a life support systems operator. We would love your feedback on today's program, so you will see a survey put in the chat here shortly. And to catch up on all of the previous episodes of UnZOOsual Careers, which features not only a horticulture specialist, but also a landscape architect, check out our YouTube playlist or our webinar page on the website. On behalf of the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute, we hope you have a wild day.